your seats, please. Get underway. Welcome. I think we'll be a very enjoyable and informative session. Follow that by discussion later. Just before we get underway, if you can just check your mobile phones or off or silent, please. Great. Our presenter today is John Locke, who is a supporter of the concept of individual rights and liberties. So we know he's in the right place. John has spent most of the last 3 years and some learning about the true nature of constitutional government as it relates to natural and common law, a term which is often given different meanings and definitions by proponents. Now, before that, John had spent time studying the concepts of liberalism at university and privately, and resisted attempts of the alleged government to control all aspects of his life. And can't we relate to that? Yep. John has also produced a series of more than 70 videos which are available on YouTube, Rumble, Telegram and BitChute under the heading Locked On Article 61. I've seen quite a few of those and they are absolutely sensational, very professionally done. Well worth a watch. He also conducts weekly Zoom meetings to which interested people can come along and ask questions and see what guidance the group can offer. Some of what John is going to say may seem controversial, but it is all verifiably factual. John's talk today will be broken into 2 parts with a break in the middle, and then we'll follow it up with a Q&A session after that. So if you can write down any questions that you have, and that will keep things rolling nice and smoothly. John will be quoting freely from other sources and referencing still others. He urges people to seriously consider the principles they express and disperse them as widely as possible. Now, as you can realise, there's no money involved here. This is not a commercial operation. It is instead a vital project to bring back people's focus on those things which are truly important and vital if we are to ever establish a free, harmonious and prosperous society. Now, I've just noticed Ian here, sorry, I'm remiss of me. I should also introduce Ian Hodson, who's come all the way from Perth with John. Welcome, Ian. Thank you for coming. He's going to be involved in the Q&A session, I believe, so we look forward to that. Now, some would argue that we already live in a prosperous society compared with historical norms, but is it becoming more or less prosperous? That's the big question. More or less free, more or less harmonious, and more or less chaotic? We'll see the answers to these questions, which depend on certain unassailable principles, which we either embrace or ignore at our own peril. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming John Locke to the lecture.
If I can make this thing work, can you hear me? Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. You don't keep that on now. Keep that on now.
Just hold the question now. You don't need to hold the button.
Okay. That's better? Yeah. All right. You can't hear me?
Yep.
First of all, I better turn my mobile on. And interrupt myself. I'm not very tech savvy, so I'm indebted to all these people that help me here. Let's make this silent. Okay, right. Now, you can see one of the slides there says that before we begin. Even before that, Victor mentioned about the principles. And that there are going to be a lot of questions. A lot of you here have never heard of me or you might have never met me before. You'll have questions, and that leads into our discussion. So I'll begin by asking everyone here a few questions. First of all, how many here are convinced, or at least suspect, that our government is irredeemably corrupt, and possibly even unlawful or criminal in nature? Okay, expected a high score for that. How many here consider yourselves to be basically immoral in nature and would resort to criminal behaviour if not constantly supervised and regulated?
We've got one over.
One or two. Okay, we've selected down a few honest people to your next. Okay. Now, if you believe yourself to be basically morally responsible and not constituting a threat to the well-being of others, what percentage of the population do you think are basically immoral, are a threat to the stability of society, and need to be constantly supervised in everything that they do? Let's have a few sort of estimates from what percentage do you think it would be?
I would have thought before COVID we were in a very low percentage, but now we see that a lot of opportunism and a lot of weakness shown by people, so maybe 60% without
60%. People that would be basically immoral and would commit crime if they had the opportunity.
However many is in government.
Sorry?
However many is in government.
They're closer to be found in government at the moment. But most of the average general section in the fields of psychology and so on is that there's around 4 or 5% of people that need to be watched closely. They'll do the wrong thing if you don't keep tabs on them, and you need to be able to have some means of dealing with these people.
maybe it's the other 36%.
Yeah. Okay. Now, since most of us think it's only a fairly small proportion, that people need to be aware of, does it follow that we need an overwhelmingly intrusive and overbearing administration to ensure a basically harmonious society? I suggest that it doesn't. We don't need to be supervised to the nth degree. This is a more pointed question now. Let's get into a bit more of the controversial thing. Which of the people in the audience would believe that they have the right to come to my house with a gun, pointed at me and demand money to fund projects that they deem are necessary, whether I agree with it or not? Okay. If you said no, why would you believe that voting in elections or referenda legitimise the same behaviour when conducted by officers of the state? So we're talking here about the concept of equality before the law. And we're going to be moving on into these slides where we're going to be talking about how this applies and what it means to each of us. So some of you might have had the question time already. This guy sounds like he'd like to sort of basically get rid of the government. So if you do that, what are you going to do about criminals? That's a logical question, isn't it? The first question anyone
So, excuse me, John, would you mind?
Sorry?
That's better.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Thanks for telling me about that. Okay. So, that's a good question. What are you going to do about criminals? Well, this is what I'm doing about criminals. I think there are certain criminals, there are certain crimes that are much more serious than other crimes. We all deplore the normal everyday crimes that people commit, theft, assault, battery, all those type of things that go on. But there are certain crimes that are much more serious because they have the capacity to completely destroy a nation. And this is what we're going to be talking about today, how this is happening in our country. So my question to you is, you're asking me what am I going to do about criminals? I would ask each of you, what are you going to do about criminals? Individually, not as a group. Individually, what are you going to do about criminals? What are you going to do about criminals? What are you going to do about criminals? Okay, let's move on to those questions. So we're looking here, this first slide. Now we're not going to be reading all through all these slides. So that's been up there for a while. Most of you have read that already. And as it says there, there's nothing really new under the sun. All the facts and truths have already been there forever. So let's move on to the next slide. It's up to us to find out what is the truth and how it affects us. So I would ask people these two things that we could try to do while we're here today. First of all, don't pay too much attention to how I look or sound, whether I'm the sort of person that will appeal to you or not. It's the information that's presented that's as important. Pardon?
Microphone near your chin.
Near the chin. Yeah? Okay. Is that better? I can't seem to get the hang of it. Okay. Now, the second thing is to be consciously aware of any impulses you have to reject information solely based on your initial emotional response. Some of the things I say will conflict with things that people here believe or have chosen, ideas that they've been following for a while. And there's nothing wrong with that. When I first heard the things I'm going to be talking to you about, I thought the people who were telling me that were crazy, right? And that was my first impression. But I went away and thought about it. I thought, well, what if what they're saying is true? Don't I need to know that? Isn't that more important than whether, how I judge these people? Is what they're telling me true? So let's move on. Thanks, Evie. So we're going to start by talking about principle. What is principle? It's very important to define the words that we use. A principle is a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for a system of behaviour or a chain of reasoning. And it comes from the etymology of it. The origin is a Latin word, princeps or princip, meaning first or chief. So a principle comes before everything else. Before we decide on a course of action, we can decide on that just based on ad hoc responses, or we can use principles to guide us. Let's go on. So this here talking about teachability, I think most of the people here are fairly teachable, otherwise they wouldn't be here. To come here, you want to learn a few things, you hear something maybe different from what you've heard before, and have the opportunity to ask questions about it. So let's go on from there. So it's not what we don't know that makes us ignorant, it's what we don't want to know. Well, I don't know much about maths, I'm pretty poor at maths. And I've never really been interested in it, little bits and pieces here and there to help me get through everyday life. But I'm ignorant about maths, and I admit that. It's because I don't want to know. The information's there and I wanted to learn about it. Okay. So we're talking about we want to get to a society that's better than the one we've got now. We say that humans will say that they want certain things to be better or conditions to be there. But there are requirements for those things that have to be met. And I'd like to use the example of Thomas Edison when he was working on developing the electric light bulb. Right? Eventually he succeeded, and of course it changed the world. But when he was congratulated on that in an interview, they said, what a great achievement it was. He said, yes, thank you. He said, but I know 10,000 ways it doesn't work. Right? He had to find out the physical laws that govern the interaction of the chemicals and the electricity and so on that he was trying to create before he got the desired result. So, in other words, we need knowledge if we're going to get what we want. And there's two ways where that could be, there are two reasons we might not have knowledge. Let's go on to the next one. The next one was going to be about leadership. We'll come to that. But knowledge, there is certain knowledge that's available to everybody, and there is certain knowledge that is hidden. And we see at the top of that pyramid there, the word occult. It means it derives from the Latin adjective hidden. And there are groups of people who know certain things about how the community works, how human interrelationships work. And they keep that knowledge hidden from the bulk of the people. So most people don't know about the things we're going to be talking about today. Okay. Next one. Okay. So when those people have that knowledge and it enables them to control or manipulate what's going on, it creates a power differential between the people who have the knowledge and the ones who don't have it. For example, and I'll state this quite openly, the people who are running the country at the moment, who call themselves the government, they know that they don't really have the authority of the Crown or the proper lawful authority. But most people don't. Well, some of us know that. And our job is to get that information out. Let's move on. Okay. So this is talking about those particular types of knowledge. It causes an unlevel playing field where people who have got this hidden knowledge can control and manipulate everybody else. And they do this through various means, one of which would be the parliamentary and the legal system that we have. There's people in the room who have recently been in the court and found out that it's a minefield. It's designed to trap and ensnare people. And they have different meanings for the words that we use. It's not a good idea to get in there and engage with those people. Let's carry on. Okay, these are the two means why people might not have knowledge. Nescience, which is the Latin word nesciere, meaning to not know because knowledge is absent or unobtainable, and ignorance is when the knowledge is available, but it's been willfully refused or ignored. So those are those two problems there. Now the main problem with problem solving is we need to first accept that there is a problem. I think most of us here do agree with that there's a problem in our society. But we have to diagnose the causes of the problem. Let's carry on. Okay. So once we've applied the knowledge and worked out what are the causes, then we have to take action to rectify the situation. Let's carry on. So we get moving on now to talking about questions about rights. Now this article here is taken from an article by William Kidd. Has anyone here heard of William Kidd? He's an English constitutional student. He's been producing content for quite a number of years. He's done interviews with Richard Bobes. He and I did an interview with Richard last year. And he starts off, he produced an excellent article in one of his websites called upplifting.org. The link will be up to that later on. He points out in there, he starts off with the question, why is it that in the freedom movement, the different voices can't get together and work out some sort of common ground or some common means of dealing with the situation? It's a question